right now I'm going to discuss about which classes will have to unit test and why. So long story short, we are going to create unit tests for car controller class and for the car service class. Right. You may wondering why aren't we creating unit tests for the other ones? So for the car class, this is a Pojo. So for this car class inside the model package, this is a Pojo class. Usually you don't have to create unit tests for Pojo classes. Why? In here we are having so the Lombok data and notation is creating behind the scenes setter, getter, constructor, everything. And we know that setter and getters, for example, we know how they work. They will always work like that if you use the default, right? Setters and getters, and it doesn't make sense in losing time over unit testing something that you already know how it works and it's something very very simple. But sometimes it can happen this, and I don't recommend you doing this, but sometimes it's unavoidable. So it can happen that you have to create a specific implementation, right, of the setters. So let's say that in here, when trying to set the number of seats, we are saying to set the number of seats only if the number is lower than 7, let's say. It's just a mere example, right? So in this case, in this Pojo class right now, in this setter class, you are having a logic, a custom logic that has to be tested in order for you to make sure that it works as you expect, right? Like I said, I don't recommend doing this, but sometimes I recognize that it's unavoidable, right? Then for the car repository, like I told you, you have to think of this class as a real repository, right? And for demo purposes, I just simulated the repository. So in order to work like one, ignore the code in here. But the main idea is that the usual car repository in a Spring Boot project would look something like this. It would be an interface that would extend the JPA repository, right? And think as this car as the entity, right? And basically, Spring will create behind the scenes implementations for methods, right? So let me show you methods in here. So for example, if right now I would implement it in here, right? So let's say like usual car repository and just do like get all car, find all cars, right? And we would use the usual car repository. We would have a lot of methods in here, right? It doesn't make any sense for you to unit test these things because they are already implemented by the framework behind the scenes. So we don't have to create unit tests for things that are implemented by the framework, right? It can also happen in the case of repositories that you'll have to create custom implementations. You'll have to write code for saving, for getting data. Yeah, so in that case, in that specific case, it's great. It's I think it's mandatory actually to have unit tests in there as well in order for you to make sure that the repository works as it should. But in the moment in which you use this JPA repository capabilities, it doesn't make any sense to unit test this class. So I hope what I said makes sense. And let's get to the next step.